This really happened to me, and I'm telling it the only way I know how. Straight, unvarnished, and in my own words. I'm a 58-year-old woman from Evanston, Illinois, and the night everything snapped back into place happened under a chandelier in a Gold Coast ballroom. They told me not to come to the reunion, but when I walked into the Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel and craned my neck at the vinyl banner strung above the stage, it read, in curling Navy script, honoring our largest donor, Irene Walker. Tables glittered with votives, name tags lined the linen-draped check-in, and the hum of 100 voices swelled as classmates lifted flutes of Prosecco. We were gathered for our 40th, Evanston Township High School, class of '85, under that banner, the one that bore my name, the same name that the reunion committee had told me to keep at home, to sit this one out, to stop distracting the program. The betrayal came hours earlier in an email from the committee chair, my old friend turned arch rival, Lydia Cross, saying they couldn't guarantee my safety if I attended. Now, beneath a chandelier, the color of champagne, I realized why. She'd planned to steal my place and my gift in front of everyone. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I didn't come to gawk. I came to make sure that scholarship money didn't end up in the wrong pockets, and that the people who'd made a sport of humiliating me in the '80s didn't get to profit from my name in the '20s. Standing there, I could smell gardenias in the centerpieces and the faint tang of spilled white wine soaked into the carpet. The banner looked handmade because it was, the last-minute rush kind, the grommets uneven, the ink still glossy near the serifs. It shouldn't have been possible for my name to be 10 feet high if the last email I got said, "Don't come." But in Chicago, money moves quicker than email, and last-minute banners arrive with the swipe of a card. I used to think that adulthood would smooth out the old bully's edges. I ran a small Finnish carpentry business on the North Shore for 20 years. Walker and Grain, restoring crown moldings in pre-war co-ops and patching the hearts of old houses. 2 years ago, I sold it. It was a clean exit, that rare, generous buyout to a young woman I'd trained, and it left me with more money than a girl who counted quarters at the student center ever thought she'd see. I knew exactly where I wanted some of it to go. The ETH's Future Trade Scholarship for students who chose apprenticeships instead of 4-year degrees. The path I knew, the path that saved me. It wasn't flashy. It was $250,000, enough to spin off small awards for a long time, and I'd asked for 2 conditions in the donor paperwork. Keep my identity quiet until the first class graduated, and keep the scholarship independent from the Alumni Foundation's general fund. The paperwork came back from the district office with the right numbers and the right language, signed by the superintendent, notarized, and filed at the District 202 office on Dodge Avenue. I remember touching the embossed seal and feeling a little dizzy. One small thing, done right. Lydia Cross texted me the day the news began to leak. She'd been my best friend once, the kind who looped pinky fingers with you under the bleachers and swore that you'd always tell each other the truth. In high school, she had the kind of beauty teachers forgave, the kind of smile that lived in fundraisers and calendars. The Cross family owned a small commercial real estate firm that grew into something muscular in the '90s. After college in Madison, and a first marriage that didn't last, Lydia married a developer named Jerry, who wore scarves even when it wasn't cold and liked to talk about activating underutilized corridors. In our 30s, she stopped calling me back. In our 40s, she ran the ETS Alumni Foundation. In our 50s, she was a board name that appeared on donor walls at the Art Institute and in glossy programs at the Lyric. Her text, "Heard you did something big. I'm chairing the reunion this year. Let's catch up." The subtext was why I didn't answer. When we were 17, Lydia, her then boyfriend Trent, now a real estate lawyer with a permanent golf tan, and our class clown, Dax Caldwell, now a defense attorney with billboards on the inbound Kennedy, had decided to teach me a lesson. I was the girl who worked nights at Lou Malnati's on Central Street and ran the register at Ace Hardware Saturdays, the one who corrected grammar under my breath and showed up to school with paint on my forearms. 2 weeks before senior prom, a fake letter circulated with our shop teacher's signature, declaring that I'd been caught stealing drills. Me, the kid who cared for tools like children. They taped it to my locker. They tipped off the dean. I remember the shame so hot it felt like fever, the way the hallway quieted as I walked, the way people looked at the floor. I was suspended for 3 days before the truth worked its way out. The dean called the shop teacher. The signature wasn't his. The cameras had caught Dax at the office copier. Lydia cried and said it was a joke. The apology they offered in the counselor's room sounded like, "Don't you get it? It was an honor to be the center of attention for once." I graduated, got my union card, and got on with it. They got class officer photos, then business cards that made the world lean toward them when they spoke. So when Lydia texted, I didn't answer. I made the donation through the district's office, the seat of government, not the Alumni Foundation. And I told myself I'd be a ghost on awards night. Then, in late spring, I began to hear that the scholarship had a new name, the Cross Family Future Builders Awards. I heard it at a coffee shop in Rogers Park from a retired teacher who still gossiped with the secretary at the central office. I saw it in a draft program forwarded to me by a junior I'd mentored at the woodshop. He sent a photo of a Google Doc on a computer screen with the cross name in bold. I took a deep breath and decided not to assume the worst. Maybe the foundation was bundling checks. Maybe someone got confused. I called the district office and left a message for the superintendent's assistant, a woman named Tamika, with a voice like firm velvet. Tamika called me back the next day from the Daily Center, where she said she was filing paperwork. "Irene," she said, "on my copy, it's the name you asked for. But you should know Ms. Cross has been by twice to ask for a copy of your donor letter, and she was told politely that she needs your written authorization to access it." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my quiet kitchen off Dempster Street, the late afternoon light making stripes on the table. That night I drove to Pequod's in Morton Grove for a slice and sat at the bar thinking about forgery and the feel of copy paper in a high school office. If there was a way to get into something meant to be private, Lydia and the boys would find it. I pictured that banner already being designed, her name 10 feet tall. A week later, the email arrived. The subject line read, "Reunion RSVP, Final Changes and Safety Note." It was from the ETS class of 85 Gmail, the one with a tiger in the icon. But the tone was pure Lydia. "Hi all. We are thrilled to celebrate a sold-out 40th reunion this Saturday at the Drake Hotel. In order to ensure enjoyment for all guests, and due to certain online interactions that have escalated in tone and raised concerns among classmates, we reserve the right to refuse entry to anyone who attempts to disrupt the event. Irene W., due to your public accusations regarding donor funds, we cannot guarantee a safe environment for you if you choose to attend. For everyone's comfort, we ask that you refrain from attending. I read it twice. Public accusations. I had made exactly one phone call to Tamika and one voicemail to the district's general line asking when awards night would be. I hadn't posted a word. I stared out at the wet sidewalk, my wind chimes tapping a nervous code. The second paragraph was a flourish. We are grateful to the Cross family for their extraordinary leadership and generosity to our school community. Please join us in honoring them. The old shame uncoiled like a muscle memory. For 2 days, I slept badly and answered no calls. Then, in that dawn hour when the train on the Purple Line hisses into Evanston, I made coffee and opened my laptop. If they wanted me to stay away, there had to be a reason. And if they'd learned anything from high school, it was that I don't stay told. I started where any ghost with a checking account would, the paper trail. I still had the donor paperwork, 3 pages with the district letterhead, a memorandum of understanding, and a page with the routing details for the separate scholarship fund. I scanned them into a PDF and read every word. Then I logged into the Illinois Attorney General's Charitable Trust database and pulled filings for the ETHS Alumni Foundation. The latest Form 990, Public Information, listed restricted funds categories. The Future Trades Scholarship line was there, newly created, with an incoming amount that matched mine to the dollar. A second line listed discretionary managerial consolidation transfers. I screenshotted it. Then I searched Cook County Recorder of Deeds because Jerry Cross's developments have a habit of following public school bond money like wolves follow deer. There was nothing obvious. Not yet. I texted my niece Laura, a second-year accountant, who could smell a misclassification in her sleep. Can I bring you takeout and show you something? She said she had a late shift at a River North firm. I said I'd be there at 9 with Banj Me. We sat on the floor of a studio near the merchandise mart, the L rattling its old rhythmic lullaby outside, and spread papers. They're not stealing it, Laura said, tapping a nail at the ledger on the 990. They're parking it in a foundation account that gives them discretion, which is a way of saying they can temporarily consolidate funds. That's not illegal, but it's a red flag if the donor agreement says the money is restricted to a separate account. It does, I said, and showed her the language. Separate fund, no commingling, donor anonymity until the first awards were made. Donor approval for any public use of name. Laura looked up. You have them, if you want them. I thought about Lydia's pinky promise and the letter on my locker and the way she had cried while the dean glared at me. I thought about how bright her smile would be under a chandelier. I thought about the word anonymous and how easily people in pearls forget to read it. I don't need blood, I said. I need proof. Which is why, 2 nights later, I was in the Starbucks on Church Street with a stringer from the Chicago Tribune named Luis, who wore a baseball cap low and listened more than he spoke. You'll never see my name attached, he said, but I'll put this on the desk of an editor who has a nose for soft corruption stories. You know the type? No one goes to jail, but they don't get to keep the free champagne either. I don't want the school dragged, I said. It's not the kids' fault. It's not the shop teacher's fault. It's people who never learn the difference between stewardship and theft. Louis sipped. You going to the reunion? They told me not to. That's what makes a story, he said, and his grin was small and wicked. Get me something the night of. A quote, a photo, an email, something. When I stood from the cafe table, the old muscles of fight and flight shook in my legs. I'd spent a lifetime being better with wood than with people. But I could fit joints so snug that daylight couldn't get between them, and I could do the same with a plan that started with an inconvenient, glaring banner and ended with a microphone. But first, I needed to know exactly how close Lydia and her boys were to polishing my name off and gluing theirs on. And that meant going somewhere that smelled like lemon cleaner and old files, riding an elevator that chimed past marble halls, and asking for the kind of records that would make a committee chair swallow hard when she saw my face at the check-in table, if I decided to walk up anyway. Which is how I found myself the next morning at the Richard J. Daley Center, standing under that grid of steel and concrete, watching a flock of pigeons lift and resettle on Picasso's rusty giant as the revolving door hissed me in toward the county clerk's records office, where I was about to ask for a very specific paper trail that, if it existed, would make the banner above the ballroom stage either the last-minute truth or the first in a now familiar chain of forgery. And the woman behind the counter, Tamika, with the voice like firm velvet, looked up, recognized me, and said, Ms. Walker, I was just about to call you. Because someone with a very familiar handwriting, had tried to beat me there. Tamika slid a manila folder across the counter with the calm of a person who has seen everything. Weddings, divorces, incorporations, dissolutions, fire-breathing public records requests written on napkins. I'm not supposed to show you anything without a formal request, she said. But what I can tell you is that a woman matching Ms. Cross's description came here with a letter claiming to be from you, authorizing access to your donor agreement on file at the district office. What did you do? I called the district to confirm. The district said they had not received any such authorization from you, and that all donor records for that scholarship are sealed except to the donor, the superintendent, and the fund accountant. I also compared the signature on the letter to the one on the file I saw 2 weeks ago. And Tamika leaned forward. I'm no handwriting analyst, but the one I saw today looked like it had been traced. My throat went dry. No matter how many decades roll by, when forgery touches your name, it steals the moisture from your mouth and the heat from your hands. Can I make a FOIA request for a copy of that attempted authorization? I asked. Or at least file a statement that my authorization has not been granted? You can, Tamika said. There's a form. I'll walk you through it. And I'll add a note in the file that if anyone else comes in, they call you and the district's council. We filled out boxes, checked lines, chased the bureaucracy through its labyrinth. When my pen lifted from the last signature block, Tamika tapped the counter twice with her nails. One more thing, she said. Ms. Cross asked if the foundation could temporarily house the trade scholarship pending a branding decision because, quote, The current donor is shy and wouldn't mind. I told her it doesn't work that way. I thanked her so hard, I made her laugh. On my way out, I stood on the sidewalk and watched the buses swing around the corner, the light hitting the Picasso's nose. The city smelled like hot pretzels and rain on stone. Somewhere uptown, Lydia was picking out a dress to go with a gala ribbon. Somewhere, Dax was telling a buddy at Gibson's how to make a nuisance disappear. Somewhere, Trent was calling the hotel to confirm that the microphone would be working. I could decide not to show up, and the night would proceed as if I had never existed, hosted by the people who had always made a pastime of erasing me. Or I could walk in with my head up, and when they lifted their glasses to honor the largest donor, I could make sure everyone in that room heard the truth in my voice. I drove back to Evanston and parked near the lake, the wind roughing the tops of the waves like a hand through hair. I sat on a bench near Northwestern's campus, watched an early morning jogger rise toward the skyline, and let myself decide. Revenge wasn't the word. Accountability was. I was too old to burn for burning's sake. I wanted a clean ledger. I wanted the scholarship to live. And I wanted the people who had tried to mug its soul to learn something they should have learned at 17, that a person like me doesn't scare easy. Resolve is quieter than fury. It doesn't shout. It fills your bones like a good breakfast. Back home, I made a list. The banner, the one above the Drake stage, could be my ally if I made it mine. The microphone could be mine too, if I made a reservation with the AV vendor under the name that already hung from grommets. The press would need a nudge. The school would need someone in the room who wasn't drunk on nostalgia. And the foundation would need to see the exact documents they had hoped would never breathe air. At noon, I called the Drake and asked for the events office. The woman who answered, bright as a bell, confirmed the ballroom, the head count, the load-in time. And the presenting sponsor? I asked, like I did this every day. We had an update to their display assets. Oh, she said, that was last minute. We got a new banner through a rush print. Cash order. It says, honoring our largest donor. If you have revised artwork, we'll need it by 4. My heart kicked. Can I email you a clarification? Same name, slightly different logo. Of course. I thanked her, hung up, and called Laura. I need you to help me make something, I said. A banner that looks exactly like the one they'd rush order at the last second, only ours will be the truth. And then I need you to help me schedule an email to the alumni list for 5 minutes after Lydia takes the microphone. She whistled. Aunt Irene, you're fun when you're mad. They once accused me of stealing drills, I said. This time, I'm stealing back my name. By 3, my dining table was covered in mock-ups. By 5, I'd learned more about vector files than any carpenter should have to. By 6, I had emailed the hotel a clarifying banner that used the same fonts as the rush print, the same color, the same curl of navy script, the same message, only with a small addition tucked beneath my name. Established by contract with District 202, Restricted Fund, 8th Future Trade Scholarship. It wasn't a threat. It was a caption. At 7, I scheduled an email to go to Luis and to a handful of classmates I still trusted, the ones who had stood next to me in the woodshop with sawdust in our eyelashes. The subject line, in case it gets loud tonight. The attachments, my donor agreement, the relevant page of the 990, the FOIA request receipt for Tamika's file note, and a one-paragraph explanation in plain English. The last line: "If anyone asks why an old woman with a steady voice stood up and told the truth, tell them it was because somebody tried to take a scholarship away from kids who work with their hands." At 8, I ironed a black dress I hadn't worn since my niece's graduation. I pinned my hair up the way I do when I sand curves and touched my grandmother's ring. Then I set my phone to record, slipped a small audio recorder into my clutch. Old carpenters are meticulous about backups, and drove south toward the lake, the skyline rising like a question I knew how to answer. The check-in table looked like a magazine spread. The gardenias were crisp, the place cards in calligraphy, the bar already sweating condensation onto napkins with Eith's tigers. Dax's laugh rolled from somewhere near the whiskey. Trent's handshake clapped through the air like a metronome. Lydia's cheekbones caught the chandelier's light like two tiny mirrors. I stood at the edge for a moment and watched them. I could feel my pulse in my throat, steady and slow. And then I stepped forward, toward the woman with the guest list, and the marker poised to draw a line through my name. "Don't bother," I said, and set my ID on the table so the letters were large and inarguable. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to accept thanks." Because above us, the banner had just been rehung, and if you squinted, you could see the new line of text beneath my name. Small but impossible to ignore, like a carpenter's signature burned into the underside of a perfect joint. And there's a certain breed of thief who only understands they've been seen when the room starts to applaud for the wrong person. And from the bar, a voice I knew by the way, it scraped a little when he lied, said, "You've got to be kidding me." Lydia's smile froze when she saw me, which is the only time I've ever loved her face. "Irene," she said, as if a bee had landed in her Prosecco, but it was still fine. "We sent a note." "I read it," I said. It read like a threat from someone who's afraid of paper. She glanced up at the banner, then at the stage, then back to me. "There's been a misunderstanding. The foundation manages the scholarship funds. It's cleaner that way." "For you," I said. Her hand, pale and manicured, went to the silk at her collar. "Let's not do this. Only if you give the microphone to me when you call the donor." "We weren't going to," she said, too fast. "Then why the banner?" "It's an acknowledgement of the class's generosity," she said, eyes adjusting mid-sentence, finding the lie that sounded most like a sentence she'd said before. Behind her shoulder, Dax and Trent drifted closer, the way men who have backed the same lie together drift when one starts to wobble. Dax wore a suit that said he charged by the hour, even when he slept. Trent had the fake casual tie loosened an inch, as if he believed that made him approachable. I could taste the old cafeteria smell of them, chlorine and privilege, and a hint of aftershave you buy at O'Hare. Trent said, "Irene, surely we can be adults." "I've been one for 40 years, I said. "You should try it." Dax lifted his palms. "We're honoring the crosses tonight. That's the program. This isn't a courtroom, but if it were, I'd advise you to sit down and enjoy the appetizers." My phone, face down in my clutch, hummed once, a text from Luis. On the stage, a tech tested the microphone, and the feedback's quick needle made everyone flinch. We were animals, all of us. We could pretend to be orchids, but the truth was in the twitch. I leaned in close enough that I could see the tiny golden tiger charm at Lydia's throat. "When you read the speech you wrote for yourself," I said, and you come to the part where you unveil the Cross-Family Future Builders Awards. Will you say the word restricted? Will you say separate fund? Will you say anonymous donor? Or will you consolidate your way into a round of applause? Her smile rippled and repaired. "Take a seat, Irene," she said, and the way she said my name brought back 100 cafeteria tables, 1,000 hallway pass-bys, 1,000,000 tiny cuts that healed wrong. I took a seat. I sat where I could see the stage and the banner and the exit, and I slid the audio recorder out of my clutch and clicked it on. The gardenias smelled like a wedding. The room had the warm, afloat feeling of a cruise ship. The laughter swelled and ebbed like espresso foam. At the next table, a woman I'd soldered copper with in sophomore metal shop touched my wrist and whispered, "You look good." My throat wanted to close. I told it not yet. The MC was a man who used to do the morning announcements with a radio DJ's dream. He welcomed us, told a joke about our principal's perm, and invited us to stand and clap for ourselves. We did shyly. Then he set up the special acknowledgement and asked Lydia to join him on stage. She moved like light. She always did. She took the microphone with a practiced breath and said, "It is my great pleasure to honor a legacy of giving that makes this night possible." And then she looked past the first row and knew she had to revise. And to honor, in particular, the incredible generosity of one of our own, she said, a delicate pivot, the ballerina's cheat. Tonight we celebrate the ETH's Future Trades Scholarship, made possible by the extraordinary support of the Cross family and our alumni community. A murmur. The kind people might mistake for agreement if they weren't attuned to its questions. My niece's email bomb would land in 5 minutes. My attachments would sit in a dozen inboxes, like plates under domes. The reporter would be on his train, leaning into his phone, waiting. Lydia's voice warmed. The scholarship is more than money. It is belief. It says to the students who build, repair, and craft, "We see you. We value you." I stood. "Then let them see the one who paid for that belief," I said, and the room turned toward me as if it had been waiting for me to stand since 1985. For a moment, the chandelier's crystals refracted my face into 100 shimmering versions, all of us older and braver than we used to be, and I realized there was only one thing left to do. Walk to the stage, take the microphone, and tell the exact, boring, devastating truth into it. Which is when the tech, the one with the checklist, leaned into the wings and said, a little too loud, "Ma'am, the presenting sponsor sent revised artwork, and I was told to swap it in when Ms. Cross started speaking. Is that now?" And all at once, the banner above Lydia's head unfurled the new strip, the tiny edition in navy script catching the light. Established by contract with District 202, Restricted Fund, ETH's Future Trade Scholarship. Donor, Irene Walker, announced by donor's consent. The room breathed in. The microphone in Lydia's hand hissed with silence. And Dax, forgetting himself, said the first honest words I'd ever heard from him. "Oh, hell." I reached the stage, and the tech, God bless union crew, who know when a moment requires a cable and when it requires a spine, handed me a second microphone as if he'd been waiting to. "I'll be brief," I said, and the room was so quiet I could hear the ice settling in glasses. "This is mine, not the speech, this scholarship. I'm Irene Walker. I run a sander better than a paragraph. I donated the money because that shop saved me when I was a girl with glue on her fingers and a temper that didn't have a safe place to go. My donor agreement is with District 202, not with the Alumni Foundation. It's a restricted fund, separate from general gifts. It is for kids who choose work that leaves beautiful, useful things behind. Someone, bless them, clapped. Then another. I held up my free hand. Please wait. There's a boring part. It matters. I looked at Lydia, whose face was smooth as lake ice. The foundation proposed to consolidate the funds temporarily. That is not what the donor agreement allows. A representative attempted to access donor records with a letter that does not bear my signature. I have filed a FOIA request and notified the district that I did not and would not authorize that access. I have provided my paperwork to a reporter who will not use this room as a cudgel against the school, but who will tell the truth if that is required. You're grandstanding, Dax said, finding his footing. You could have handled this privately. I tried, I said. Twice. I left messages. I received a public email telling me not to come. Because of your threats, Trent said, his voice laced with lawyerly exasperation. My threats, I said, were a question and a request for a schedule. Lydia stepped forward and tried to take the microphone. The tech, subtle and miraculous, adjusted the gain on mine and let hers go soft. The Cross family has supported this school for decades, she said. Our intention was to bring the scholarship under a professional umbrella to ensure accountability and legal compliance. Then you should be delighted, I said, and lifted my clutch, where my audio recorder blinked its tiny red LED like a heart. Because accountability and legal compliance have arrived. Someone near the back laughed. A short, bright sound like a match strike. I looked out over the faces, so many of them mapped by time in ways that softened them, humanized them. We were not kids anymore. We were the sum of our repairs. I was told not to come because it would make some people uncomfortable to be seen, I said. I came anyway because I have a rule that has saved my life more than once. If I'm asked to make myself small, I check whether the request comes from someone who once made me feel small for sport. If it does, I don't do it. The MC made a little helpless gesture with his hands, an apology to the gods of program flow. I spared him a smile. We can do the slideshow, I said. We can sing along to the Go-Go's. I'll even toast to the strange gift that is surviving long enough to be kinder than we were. But first, the foundation will confirm, right now, that the trade scholarship remains a restricted district fund, not consolidated, that no one will attempt to access my donor file again without written authorization, and that any public use of my name is by my consent. And then you can have your cake. Or what? Dax said. You'll sue? He meant to make it sound like a bluff. Or, I said, I will walk out to Michigan Avenue, where a reporter is waiting, and I will tell him that a woman who once helped tape a lie to my locker tried to tape a different lie to the district's ledger. Silence has textures. This one was brittle. I could hear it splinter. Trent put his hand on Lydia's lower back and leaned in. Maybe he was telling her to swallow her pride and say the words that would let the night proceed. Maybe he was reminding her that every public person fears a headline. Maybe he was telling her something about me that he'd always known, that the girl who counted quarters at the pizza place learned to count to 3, and that she tended to set her palm down on the table on 2. Lydia looked at me, then at the banner, then at the microphone in my hand, and for a blink of a second, I saw the girl under the gloss. Mortified, angry, small as a pin in a map. The foundation will comply with the donor's wishes, she said. Effective immediately. Applause came not like thunder, but like rain beginning. It moved across the room in a pattern you learn if you've spent a life under ceilings, tentative, then sure. People who had been afraid to look at me looked. Someone near the bar said, "Good," as if something inside had unclenched. I nodded once, handed the microphone back to the tech, and returned to my seat. The slideshow began. Photos of us in acid wash and feathered bangs drew laughter that warmed the room back into itself. But the faces of my three antagonists had that millionaire's stillness that isn't peace. Dax left twice to take calls. Trent studied his drink like it could brief him. Lydia sat as if still pretending to command the stage by will alone. My phone buzzed. Luis. Got it. On background now. If they try to spin, we'll ask the district for comment in the AM. You did good. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, a steadier feeling settled. What I wanted had already begun to happen. The scholarship was safe, the truth said out loud, the old story told to completion. But something in me, the part that had spent decades sanding to a clean edge, knew that trophies don't change habits. If Lydia's reflex was forgery, it wouldn't stop at a microphone. If Dax's reflex was intimidation, he'd find a way to try. If Trent's reflex was to launder language, he'd go to work in the morning. You don't fix wood by praising the varnish. You go to the rotten place and cut it out. And I knew exactly where that rot was, because 3 phones lit up at once on the committee table, and the way all 3 of them looked down, at the same time with the same surprise, told me that a shared message had just arrived. And the way their faces changed told me it was the one thing they hadn't prepared for tonight. Someone else with a conscience had hit send. Cedar, end.